Welcome back everyone, Matsimus here with you today, hope you're having a good one. So, a lot of people request on my channel, please Matsimus, do a versus this and a versus that, you know, one jet or one tank versus the other, and honestly, for the most part, I really have no interest in doing that. But I read a really interesting book about the F-18 the other day, and the kind of, you know, doctrine that they use on aircraft carrier groups, and, you know, I started doing some research into the F-18 and found, you know, what would be the F-18's adversary, its threat? In a naval combat situation, what would it be hunting if it was against another navy? For instance, the Russians or whatever else that potentially could come up against it. And I thought, well, overall, there's only going to be a couple of instances where it's going to be engaged, and that's going to be by the beautiful MiG-29. Now, the MiG-29 is one of those aircraft that I love to hate, mainly for the fact that it is absolutely gorgeous. It's the most stunning two-engined fighter jet in the world, I'd say, for sure. But I hate it for the fact that I know nothing about it, and it's about time I actually got round to start to learn about it and learn a lot more about it. And recently I started skimming the surface and doing a little bit of research on it. But coming back to my F-18 discussion here, and that's primarily the focus of today's video, is I was trying to figure out what would be the capabilities of the F-18 in an a naval combat operation against the MiG-29. Now the MiG-29 is a carrier-based naval fighter. It's designed to be on aircraft carriers just as much as the F-18 is. It's not really a Air Force aircraft in any way, shape or form. The Marine Corps obviously use it, and the US Navy. So primarily we're just really going to talk about the two fighter jets in comparison to one another and how they would really fare up in a combat situation, because really it's very fascinating to me to kind of, you know, do a little bit of background research and make my own kind of determination of what could potentially be quite an interesting face-off. So first of all, let's talk about the aircraft's development. Both the Fulcrum and the Hornet are purely carrier-based naval fighters in the configurations we're talking about today. The MiG-29K is developed from the land-based MiG-29M, whereas the F-18E and F is purely a carrier-based design from its origin. Both are designed around the 1980s period, and the rapid and far-sighted modernization program of the US Navy is what keeps the Hornet a formidable fighter plane over the sea. Similarly, the MiG-29K also rule over the sky in the Indian Ocean, being in the Indian Navy, and really being the only naval fighter apart from the Su-33K in that region. So let's talk about their design. Both of these fighters have seen a drastic change from their previous variants. The MiG-29K's airframe is strengthened to withstand the stress of landing on a carrier. Its wingspan has been increased, it has folded wings, catapult attachments and arrestor hooks that are attached. The undercarriage is also widened. The Super Hornet has pretty much followed suit in terms of increasing its capability by increasing and reviving its airframe's capabilities. The intakes are changed on the F-18 to the rectangular shape from oval to reduce the RCS and better airflow to the engines. The airframe is lengthened to carry more internal fuel, and the wing length is increased to carry an extra 2 hardpoints. The improved fuselage increases the AOA, but I'll say still that the Fulcrum is a bit more maneuverable than the Super Hornet. This is basically because the Fulcrum has a better thrust-to-weight ratio, i.e. 0.97, than the Hornet's at 0.93. So it's pretty obvious that the Fulcrum is going to have a better climb rate than the Hornet, and it can position itself quickly into a more maneuverable position than the Hornet could in a potential dogfight or combat game. In terms of engine power, these two are definitely classing up in some serious thrust. The MiG-29K has a 2RD33MK turbofan engines producing around 89 kN thrust, which is about 7% higher thrust than the previous RD33K engines of the MiG-29M, whereas the Super Hornet has two F414G 400s giving 98 kN thrust. Now just before I go any further, yes, I know the footage in the background is not of a MiG-29, but it was still really cool and I thought it sort of featured quite nicely for this video anyway, so I hope you enjoy it. So let's carry on. This is a straight advantage over the Fulcrum. 10 more kilonewtons of thrust is very impressive, but still where the Fulcrum can do basically a 2.1 plus Mach speed is because of its lighter airframe, whereas the Super Hornet is only limited to a Mach 1.8. Now interestingly, you'll still see that the Hornet has more powerful engines than the Fulcrum, but the Mach number is limited. This is because the airframe structure of the Fulcrum. If you actually notice in the wireframe diagrams of these aircraft, both planes, you will find that the Fulcrum's wing configuration is actually much better for Mach 2 plus flight, due to a better sweep angle of the wing's leading edge, whereas the Hornet can only do just fine below around Mach 1.5 and has better handling ability. So I guess for this particular area we could call this a bit of a draw, but the Fulcrum having a very slight edge over the Hornet. In the field of radar technology, Americans are very, very high on the contender list. However, that's not saying that the Russians are not on par with them. In fact, I would say they're just about on the same level, but it's very difficult to tell considering that most Russian radar technology is quite difficult to really judge because, of course, it's top secret. The MiG-29 has a multi-mode X-band pulse Doppler radar, whereas the Super Hornet has an AN APG-79 AESA radar. The ME radar has a detection range in the air-to-air mode of around 200 kilometers for 8 square miles of the RCS target. It can track 10 targets and engage 4 simultaneously. In naval mode, it can detect a destroyer-sized target at 300 kilometers, and 2 targets can be tracked at one time. Other avionics of the Fulcrum include an OLS-29 IRST system, ECM pod, Sigma 95 GPS, and an SP-015 Bezoyer RWR. The F-18's ENF's ANPAG-79 is an EAS system which has a clear advantage over the Fulcrum's ME system. Its improved beam steering, 360-degree situational awareness, and better detection range and jamming immunity really gives a clear advantage of the APG-79, and its features are entirely solid-state antenna construction, which improves reliability and lowers the cost a little. The radome of the APG-79 slides forward instead of hinging to the right, which saves space in the aircraft as a carrier option. Overall, I would say that the Super Hornet is quite the winner here when it comes to its constant modernization program from the US Navy. Not only radars, but all other avionics systems as well, and to be honest, it's going to be very difficult to mention them all here. But to be honest, from what I can find in research, they seem very superior and more capable than the beautiful Fulcrum. Sadly, the MiG-29K does not have an ESAR radar, but the MiG-29 will eventually potentially have it placed in the future. It's not determined just yet. So that clearly will bring it up to par with the F-18. In terms of countermeasures, the RCS of both fighters is reduced by extensive RAM coating and airframe design, but although the Hornet's not really a true stealth fighter in any way, it has a much improved RCS than the Fulcrum. Otherwise, in terms of other countermeasures, both are pretty equally good, and only the Hornet has better jamming resistance than the Fulcrum due to its AESA system, but the Hornet has a better suited electronic warfare capability than the MiG-29 due to its AN ALE-165 SPS jamming pod developed by Northrop Grumman. In terms of armaments, the Fulcrum has a beautiful 30mm cannon with 100 rounds, whereas the Hornet incorporates a 20mm M61 Vulcan with 580 rounds. In terms of hardpoints, the MiG-29K lacks the extra 4 hardpoints of the F-18 Hornet, which has 13, whereas the MiG only has 9. This is because smaller wing area and lighter airframes of the MiG-29s make it a lot more difficult to carry extra weapons. Both can carry a variety of air-to-air and anti-ship missiles and different guided and unguided munitions for bombing. But the Fulcrum has one advantage over the Hornet, that it can accommodate different foreign missiles as well. But the Hornet is tailor-made for American missiles only, which makes complete sense. In terms of anti-shipping capability, the MiG really has a slight edge with the Russian KH-35 and the KH-31 Alpha, although the Hornet's AGM-84 Harpoon is equally as good, but still really not up to the Russian standards. However, due to the different loading capacity on the Hornet, the Fulcrum will actually run out of missiles sooner than the Hornet in an actual air combat situation. I would say for armaments, these aircraft are pretty much again at a draw. Overall, in terms of a final face-off of these two aircraft, we see that the Russians really do possess a bit of an advantage in terms of aerodynamic design. However, they really haven't truly mastered the radar technology that we know of and their electronic warfare capabilities. So in an actual conflict between these two jets, we may actually see that the Hornet is obviously going to see the MiG first and be able to engage it first, but potentially the MiG could actually outdodge and get away from these missiles by deploying flares and countermeasures, and due to its increased agility, potentially get away from the missiles. But I mean, in terms of lengthy engagements, we're going to see that the Hornet is probably going to win. I would say the chances are very low unless the pilot is really classy and really skilled to get away from those missiles, but it would be a pretty tight match. As I said, we don't know enough about the MiG's radar technology to really make much of a say on it, but in terms of head-on battle when it comes to long-range engagements, the F-18's electronic suite and weapon suites are very advanced. I've got to admit, I just couldn't find enough information on the MiG-29's or the MiG-29K's electronic suite for engaging targets from long distance, so it's hard to say. I definitely think it would be a very tight engagement though. You know, there's a very small margin for error here between the two jets. Overall though, I think I would side with the F-18 ENF being able to win a naval conflict for the fact that, as mentioned, the US Navy really has pumped so much money into these aircraft to keep them going. But that's not saying it's a good thing. I mean, money can be wasted on anything to make it, you know, sound good and look good. Whether or not it's capable or not is hard to say, but, you know, if they're going to put money into it like they have, we know it's going to be a capable fighter for the US Navy. So, gotta put my side and money on towards the F-18. Maybe you guys can prove me wrong. I'd love to hear it in the comments section below. Fire away your arguments, fire away your debates, give me all the input you wish into your own theory on which one of these aircraft in a naval engagement would be able to actually take on the other without any, you know, casualties. It's hard to say, it really is. This is purely theoretical, it's purely just fantasy. You know, I would never want to see these two aircraft come against one another, or any aircraft, to be honest, in a naval conflict. But my money's is on the F-18 right now than the MiG-29K. Anyway, guys, I really appreciate you stopping by today. Like I said, this video is purely just kind of a theoretical, having a bit of fun video. I know a lot of you are going to be highly, highly upset in the comments section and going to be so mad about all the information or misinformation maybe that I provided. But I'm just going on the stuff that I could find on the internet and kind of doing my own background research. As always, I know very little about aircraft, and I'm not going to say I do. A lot of you get very, very upset when I talk about topics I don't know much about and I get things wrong. And honestly, I appreciate that. I understand that I'm not going to get everything right every time, but you know what? I'm just having some fun with it, and that's why I want to hear your comments in the comment section. Prove me wrong. Tell me your side of the argument. Maybe there's something that I'm missing, or maybe there's something I can add that you think will, you know, change my balance of aircraft against one another. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. All the best. And if you do want to support my channel, please feel free to check out my Patreon page. I would really appreciate it. It's in the description box below. All the best, and bye-bye.